get them posted up there fairly quickly. Yeah. Okay. Hi. Good. Are you new?
Yes.
Okay. There's a sign-in sheet floating around. Whenever it gets to you, write your name and email address,
Okay.
and try to make it legible.
We have to do email again?
No,
It's so
if
long.
if you have access to the website, you're good. If you're just new or don't, then just write your name, and then we'll make a note by your name that you're new today, first day, and we'll get you set up. Oh, we did. We have your email. Okay. Well, this will allow us to create your account, so you can get access to the website and all that stuff. Okay, so you guys ready to get started? All right, good. Well, today is Module 1. We're going to talk about how the body gets hungry. We're going to talk about the mechanisms of how at the first part of the presentation. And then the second part of the presentation is going to be our recommendations. So now we talked about all this stuff, what do we want you to do? Normally, I'm going to make one point. Normally this presentation is an hour. So if we're supposed to be done at 12:45, I think. So I'm going to talk quickly and cram a bunch of stuff in. So boost your memory power. And then also you can go back online and watch the video, or whenever this audio is posted up there, you can go back and listen to that. And before I get started, I'll just make a general kind of comment. So when we get to the recommendations part of the presentation, I'm going to, and on the website, I think it's in the additional resources too, but when we talk about the foods that we want you to eat for the next 2 weeks, we don't provide you a meal plan. We provide you a basic guideline, and you pick foods from that, and then you make them fit to our recommendations. With that being said, you're going to have to sit down and do two things. You're going to have to come up with a plan to do this. So I don't want you to just be fired up today and go start tomorrow morning without thinking about how you're going to do this. The reason for that is we're making a significant shift in what we want you to do. That's number one. And most importantly, outside of this classroom and each other and me, the external environment in which we all live pushes us to an unhealthy existence. So, in other words, the things that we want you to do, the foods taste good, they're going to make you less hungry, but it's not conducive for our advertising, our grocery stores, even though you can go to H-E-B or Kroger or wherever you want to go, the commercials on TV, the stuff you hear from health and fitness professionals regarding foods that you need to eat. It's there's a lot pushing you to stay unhealthy. So part of making your plan and deciding when you're going to start is to get ready to do that, so that when you decide, you can do that. So that you're less susceptible to whatever kind of external pressures may be pushing you into the wrong direction. Okay? All right, so we're going to talk about how we get hungry today. And once you start, when you start, after your first meal, when you start, you're going to begin being less hungry because of the foods you're eating. And if you're a type 2 diabetic, and one of those monthly presentations is why everyone should act like they're a type 2 diabetic coming up. I think that's in the summer. But if you're a type 2 diabetic, or if you have high blood pressure, because even though those are two separate conditions, from a metabolic perspective, they come from the same problem. So your body is struggling with metabolic issues, and we're taking our first step in trying to fix that with the recommendations today. So hopefully you're not going to be as hungry as you were in the past, and that'll make you feel good, give you more energy and all that stuff. So this is where we start. And here's a couple of, if you've been onto the website already, and maybe watched a video or read some of the materials, these are some of the things that we're going to talk about today. These definitions are important and distinct, and it's just the purpose of this stuff here is to give you some background information on what we're talking about and basing our recommendations on. So you have some way to kind of equate it in your thoughts of why we're doing what we're doing. Then maybe to give you a way of understanding these terms, we're going to go through some thought experiments to kind of put yourself into some situations that may help make this stuff seem a little bit more clear. And then we want you to think in terms of these words and buckets. And then at the end, we'll go over the food guide and the next 14 days from when you start. Doesn't have to be tomorrow, doesn't have to be today, but we want you to go through and figure that stuff out and get prepared like I said at the very beginning. So as we get started here, what is hunger? According to Webster's dictionary, it's a craving or urgent need for food or a specific nutrient. Sometimes cravings, you have cravings at night for something sweet or something salt or some salty or crunchy or maybe some combination of all those. And sometimes you're just hungry and you just need some food. So the first part of what I talked about, the cravings at night and things, that's the psychological or more of the why, and that's in Module 2. Today we're talking about the how part, the physical part of hunger. So maybe we're just looking at it as needing to eat something. And so your body needs energy to survive. And it can get energy from two different places. It can burn it with your metabolism, and it can get it from food that you eat. If your body can't burn it, then you need to eat more food because that's the only place you can get energy in any significant amount. So when you're, and we'll cover this a little bit in just a little bit, but when the energy that's available in your system, I'm not talking about your fat tissue, but I'm talking about your circulatory system and the blood and all that stuff that your body can access. Whenever that goes down, that's when you start to get hungry again. And so that needs to be at a certain level for the hunger to go away. And so if you can't access the fat tissue to kind of bring that up, then you get hungry sooner. And so we're trying to work on all that and fix all of that stuff. So so that's what hunger is, and a few things that it's not are listed there. But the most important thing is that hunger is not something that is annoying and or can be ignored. It's a survival instinct. You get hungry because your body wants you to eat something because it thinks it's lacking in energy. Now, if you're not lacking in body weight, you're not lacking in energy, but you're lacking in the ability to access the energy. And so trying to starve yourself in that particular situation is not going to be successful. And that's what we're all talking about today. Now, from a neurological or brain perspective, hunger is a very complex issue. You've got signals coming from the body going to the brain, leaving the brain, and all of this communications going on back and forth. And there are whole scientific journal articles associated with this, looking at this. But we're not going to go into that, and we're going to try to make it as simple as possible for you to understand. And we start with those words that we had on the screen up on one of the slides earlier. And these are the four words that we get started with: like, want, satiety, and satiation. So like is, if you look at the table here, we've got the word, we've got the definition, and on the right we've got PSY, which stands for psychological. So if we like a food, we're always going to like that food. And if you notice on the right, there's no for psychological. So we won't really dislike that food if we like it. And if we don't like it, we can never really train ourselves to like it. It's just kind of it's a state and kind of it is what it is kind of thing. So when we like a food, we like it for some reason because of the way it tastes. Maybe it's some kind of pleasurable food experience that we get from eating it. Maybe because it's crunchy and salty, maybe because it's soft, creamy and sweet, or it could be anything that we attribute to that food for our reasoning of liking it. And it doesn't matter. If we like it, we like it. So that's the first definition. The second definition is want. And want indicates how strong our desire is to go get a food that we like. So if we really want a food, and if we have to get in our car and drive down to the gas station to go get it, we really, really want that food. But want always fluctuates, right? You can really, really, really want a bag of chips, but as soon as that bag of chips is empty, you don't want chips anymore, right? It goes back and forth. So it's a state that's always up and down. So it just indicates how strong our desire is to go and get that food. Now, if you look on the psychological column there's a yes and a no there. So there's things that we can do to influence how much we want a food. And I don't mean by, we really want some chips. We don't want to influence it by eating chips. There's other things that we can do that decrease our desire to want them. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. Satiety is a state. It's not psychological, but it's a state that indicates the extent to which our body has absorbed nutrients from the foods that we've eaten. So, and this will become more clear as we get into the experiments, but foods that are loaded in vitamins and minerals do a good job of crawling up or filling up the satiety scale. Foods that are not, don't do that. So it's the extent to which we're absorbing vitamins and minerals and other things from the foods that we eat. So if we eat foods that are lacking in vitamins and minerals, our satiety level is always going to be low. If we eat foods that are high in vitamins and minerals, our satiety level is going to tend to be higher. And that's always going up and down as well. And then the final word there is satiation, and it sounds like satiety, but it's really different. And it's our desire to continue to eat food. So if we like chips and we want some chips, if we wipe out this whole big bag of chips, at the end of that bag, we don't really want any more chips. So our satiation is high. We're ready. We're done eating these chips, right? So that means satiation is high. Our want for them is low, but we still like them no matter what. Now, from a satiety perspective, chips don't really have any kind of nutritional value, so our satiety level is going to be low. And satiety is one of the main ways our body determines how hungry we are. So if we pound a bunch of food that doesn't contain anything more than calories, our body's always going to be hungry. We're always going to be struggling with cravings and wanting these foods because our body's hungry. But if we flip that over and eat a bunch of food that's high in vitamins and minerals, we're going to be less hungry because we're feeding our body. And that's essentially what we're going to be covering today and then talking about in terms of our recommendations. What's that?
I said you had to show that.
And by the way, you guys are welcome to bring your lunch here whenever we have those. What's that? Well, if it's bad, you better tell me you hadn't started yet.
Right. Start asking, right?
That's right. So here's a couple of examples of foods that most people like, dessert, bacon, and other things. And, just to kind of reiterate, if we like a food, we're always going to like it, but the extent to which we want that food can change. If just like with the chips, if it's dessert time after dinner and we just eat a big piece of whatever that is, we're not going to want another big piece of whatever that is. because we just had some. That doesn't mean tomorrow we're not going to want it. So if we like a food, we're always going to like it. If we want it, we may not always want it, but it doesn't mean we don't like it. And so when we eat foods that are high on the satiety scale, they feed our body. And when our body is fed, we get less hungry. And when our body is less hungry, our satiety that's because our satiety is higher, and our satiation goes down. So our desire to eat more food decreases. And so to kind of get an idea of this, I'm going to pass around a couple of things here. So, one for you. One for you. So look at this box and pass it around. I want everyone to take a look at it. And don't really say anything, but I want you to write down what the first ingredient is on your notes there. And you can do this while I'm talking. And they could just end up in the back. When you guys get them in the back, just stick them on the back table. I'll get them after we're done. So write down the food item and the first ingredient. So when I began, I said that we need to, or we would go through some thought experiments to kind of give you some idea of a real world application of these terms. And so we're at that point now. So I want you to think about putting yourself through this experiment here. I want you to think about, starting today or tomorrow, going through a 30-day experiment of only being able to eat Twinkies or drink Pepsi. Now, how long could you last on that experiment?
Not long.
Not long. Why? Huh? You could get bored. You're right. So whatever the case may be, you're bored, you don't want to eat that food. Your satiation is going to be high, so you don't want to eat anymore. Right? So that means if you're very restricted in the foods that you eat, it may be a good weight loss strategy because there's no variety, right? But what about Pepsi and Twinkies? What do those combinations of those two foods, what do they do to our satiety level? Do they do anything to feed our body? No, so our body's going to be hungry, right? So let's say that on day 31, let's say we made it 30 days on Twinkies and Pepsi. And then on day 31, we went to H-E-B or Kroger. What would we buy? Everything. Yeah, everything but Twinkies and Pepsi, right? Right. And why would we do that? Because our body is so hungry that we're compelled to just get it some food and eat whatever we wanted to have access to. Right? And it wouldn't matter what was stuck in front of us. As long as it wasn't a Pepsi or a Twinkie, we would probably eat it because we've been so long without any kind of food to feed our body. Now, on the other hand, if we have a different experiment of 30 days where we eat liver and drink water. Now, I'm assuming you like liver, but we're just doing this for discussion purpose. Now, what would happen to satiation after 30 days of eating liver and drinking water? It would be high. You would because you'd be tired of eating liver and drinking water. Just like it was with Pepsi and Twinkies. If that's all you're eating, eventually you're going to get tired of eating it. But what about satiety? Is that going to be higher or lower? It's going to be much higher. So if you eat, let's say, for example, you make it through that experiment, you eat 3 pieces of liver per day, and then day 30 you do the same thing, and then day 31 you go to H-E-B or Kroger. Because your satiety level's higher, you can go and pick whatever you want to pick at H-E-B or Kroger. You're not compelled to go and buy whatever, eat whatever, and overeat because you've been doing a good job of feeding your body. And you have some control over this. Right? Making sense? And so we got it right. So the satiety is high in the liver and water and low in the Pepsi and Twinkies. And we know why, because there's basically no nutritional value, nothing of any consequence to help feed our body. So our body's going to be really hungry. And that's going to dictate our behavior to a large extent. But when it's fed, like it is with liver, our body is not as in control. So it's kind of like, is the dog wagging the tail or is the tail wagging the dog? Right? And we want you to think of these things in terms of buckets. These buckets get full and immediately they start emptying out. So let's say with experiment 1, you've got the satiety bucket and the satiation bucket right next to each other. Well, you're eating Twinkies and drinking Pepsi, so the satiety bucket is always empty. But the satiation bucket is filling up because we don't want to eat anymore. But it keeps emptying out, so we get hungry and eat some more. In experiment 2, because we're eating liver and drinking, water's got some vitamins and minerals and things like that. So the combination of those two things, we fill up to a certain extent the satiety bucket. But our satiety bucket, our satiation bucket is full because we're eating the same thing over and over again. But because this is a state, the satiety bucket starts to empty, and the emptier it gets, so does our satiation go down, and then we're going to get a desire to eat again soon. So think about those buckets. As soon as they get full, they start emptying out. And then the important point here is this. The satiety bucket influences our desire to eat. So when our satiation is high, when our desire to stop eating is high, our desire to eat again comes back more slowly if the satiety bucket's full. We've got these two buckets here. When the satiety bucket is empty, this one empties fast. When the satiety bucket is full, our desire to eat comes back more slowly because this is emptying out slowly. So far, so good? All right, so before I move on, those 3 foods that I passed around, one was a snack, one was a dessert, and one would be considered part of a meal. What was the first ingredient of all 3 foods? Flour. They all taste the same. They all taste different. But you know what? Whether it's pasta, pretzels, or the crackers, the graham crackers, they taste different, they look different, but they act the same in your body. Now, mentally, we can differentiate between these foods. Metabolically or digestively, we can't. So if you're a diabetic, you probably inherently know that certain things can taste different, but spike your blood sugar no matter what. And what we refer to these as in the carbohydrate module, which is module 3, we have this umbrella term for that's called metabolic sugar. So those things are high in metabolic sugar. They look different, they taste different, but they're high in metabolic sugar. Think about it another way. When you go down the chip aisle at the grocery store, how many different kinds of chips are there? I mean, it's a 50-yard aisle on both sides, right? What if there was only one kind of chip in the grocery store? What if instead of experiment 1, instead of Twinkies, we did Doritos? You would still get tired of them, right? But what if you only had Doritos at the grocery store? Maybe you might buy 2 bags a month. But now you walk through the grocery store and people have 4 or 5 bags of chip in their cart, and they're all different. And the reason they're all different is because they can continue to eat Twinkies or graham crackers or pretzels or rice-a-roni pasta. That's food that's all the same but tastes different. And so no matter what people tell you about calories It's the kind of food that you eat that impacts how your body reacts. And that's what we talked about today. And we're going to get into the recommendations here in just a second. But to summarize what we've covered so far, this is it. If we eat foods we like and these foods sate us, remember if they are high in vitamins and minerals, if these foods sate us, we will want them less because we will be satiated and sated. This makes us less hungry. This is like at the end of experiment 2. You know, let's say we had some kind of magic travel machine, and at the end of experiment 1, we could pop you up in the middle of all the restaurants on the Riverwalk in San Antonio. You would just go to the first one. But if we could do the same thing after experiment 2, you may be able to pick which one you wanted to go to, right? Because you have a little bit more control because these foods are sating our body, making us less hungry. On the other hand, if we eat foods that we like and these foods don't sate us, what do we have there? We have a snack, we have a dessert, and we have part of a meal. So you could essentially eat that throughout the day. They're all three the same, but we look at them differently. But they impact our body the same way. So if we eat foods that we like and these foods don't sate us, we will be satiated, but we won't be sated. So this makes us hungry. And so we're battling that all the time. And when we eat a lot of foods like this, and this is 3 things from the grocery store. I mean, think about all the items in the grocery store that are started, the first ingredient is flour. And how they end up in our pantry. And then we eat different things all day, but we're essentially eating the same thing. So that's the essence of what we're talking about. And what I need to do now is get into what you need to do. So on the website, these slides are there, the downloads are there, the videos there. And in the future, you should, whenever the next email you get from us will be the email number 2 for Module 1. But when you get the first email for Module 2, you'll have access to Module 2 as well. So I don't want you jumping ahead to Module 4 and 5. So you may get all fired up and start asking me questions that you shouldn't be asking me yet. So we restrict you. So like I said earlier, whenever you start, and you've got to prepare for this. Because, I mean, we talked about the environmental pressures. HEB is notorious for this. Where does HEB funnel you through when you walk in the grocery store?
The bakery.
The bakery. Why do they do that?
Because you're hungry.
Well, if you're hungry, it almost guarantees you're going to buy more. But yes, it smells good. And they only do this from a sales perspective because they just know that when you're walking through there and you smell all that stuff and you see all that stuff that you're going to buy it, or you're way more likely to buy it. So that's part of the environmental pressure that I'm talking about. If you go to the grocery store and you have kids that are young and can still sit in a shopping cart, you may not have noticed this before, but the next time you take them to the grocery store, the cereal aisle has the stuff that they want at their eye level. And so it's hard for them to not notice it when you walk through the cereal aisle. So all of this stuff is environmental pressure that's making it harder for you. So the next 14 days. So we've got 3 basic rules every day. So the first rule is eat breakfast every day. As we progress, we may learn, that's a hint, may learn that breakfast may not necessarily be the most important meal of the day. But for now, you've got to eat breakfast every day. The second thing is don't skip meals. If you get hungry between meals, don't eat. Just wait till lunch or wait till dinner. And use that as a learning tool to eat more at that particular meal tomorrow. Okay? So if you eat, let's say you eat something for breakfast, but you didn't eat enough and you're hungry at lunch. Do your best not to eat anything till lunch. But tomorrow when you eat breakfast, eat a little bit more so you don't get hungry. Because we're trying to work on fixing your metabolism And when you snack in the middle of the day, that's going to start messing things up. So that's what we want you to, that's why we don't want you to have snacks and stuff like that. Question? No, I thought you were going to ask a question. And then the third thing is to monitor your hunger levels. And that, it says always in parentheses there. That's important, and you're going to get better at that the longer you do it. Sometimes we eat out of habit, but if you're hungry, really think if you're hungry. And you know, you're not, it may seem weird or strange or difficult, you know, the first day you try it, but as you do it a little bit longer, you'll get better at knowing whether or not you're hungry or just falling into a pattern here. And so just to kind of reiterate there, if you get hungry, it means you didn't eat at your previous meal. Just eat a little bit more at that meal tomorrow. So, because we don't want you eating snacks, at least not yet. So here's a breakfast guidelines. So your breakfast can only be protein and fat. So like the picture shows up here, that's bacon and eggs. Things that don't have sugar are acceptable, like a sour Greek yogurt. And if you like plain Greek yogurt, but you don't like the flavor of it by itself, when we get to the handouts, on the handouts there's food lists and stuff like that. You can have a 1/4 cup of berries per day. So if you get blackberries or blueberries or something like that, and you want to add those to the yogurt, that's perfectly acceptable for this period. But one of the simple things to do that a lot of people have success with is if you like eggs, when you start, boil a dozen eggs on the weekend and have a couple, 1 or 2 boiled eggs with you for breakfast. If you can't eat when you first get up, you've got to eat at some point, because I want you to eat 3 meals a day, at least for the time being. So your first meal of the day is important for this, and you need to do that. And again, if you're not hungry at breakfast, don't skip it, eat something just to keep going. Even if you get hungry on the other end. So that's the rules for breakfast. Here's the rules for lunch. It's basically the same thing as breakfast, but we want you to add vegetables at lunch. And we want you to have, I don't know what it is, 3 or 4 cups of vegetables per day. And you can put them all here, or you can split them between here and dinner. And vegetables are green, leafy, yellow, orange, not white, like potatoes and rice. Those are starches, and we'll talk about those in a second. But peppers, spinach, cucumbers, those kinds of things. That's what we mean by vegetables. And this picture up here shows the shrimp and salad mix. So that's your lunch, and again, no snacking. And dinner is the same as lunch, but you have the option of adding starch. So the starch that the only starch you're allowed to have for the next 2 weeks is 1/2 pound of potato per day. Now, there's an asterisk around that potato per day. If you're not diabetic and you want to add that, by all means, go for it. If you're diabetic, you need to make sure your 2-hour post-meal blood sugar is 145 or 150 at the most. If it's higher than that, then you need to eat less of the potato or just eliminate it until your blood sugar gets under better control. That makes sense what I said there? If you're diabetic, you know what I'm talking about. If you're not diabetic, you don't have to worry about it. And then the last thing is, be done with dinner at least 1 hour before bed, preferably 2 hours before bed. Now, what kind of beverages can you drink? Anything without sugar. Drink a lot of water. So what you're going to realize or notice on this plan is that your body will lose a lot of fluid because it's has a type of diuretic effect. And so you may start getting thirsty, just drink more water. Anything that's unsweetened, coffee or tea. Nothing with sugar, nothing artificially sweetened. And if you're going to get a headache because you're addicted to soda, you're on the honor system, but you can have a little bit, enough just to not get a headache. I don't want to be that cruel to you. And then I don't know how well you can see that from where you're sitting, but the bottom one says no alcohol in the next 14 days. So no glass of wine at night, no half bottle of scotch at night, no 6-pack of Bud Light or whatever it is you drink. I have to mention the Bud Light because, you know, I'm going out to Needville Road and Bridge guys later on today. So no alcohol for the next 14 days. So the alcohol comes back in 2 weeks, and in Module 2 we'll talk about why. But none for the next 14 days. And then over the next few slides here, this is available on the website, downloadable, and I think you can even view it in the table format. But here's just some options, items listed on the various food groups: meats, vegetables, beef, pork, seafood, chicken, eggs. Canned meats are acceptable, but they shouldn't be a big staple of your regular food consumption. A little bit during the week is okay, but they shouldn't be the main thing, because canned meats tend to have a lot of fillers. Speaking of which, does anyone know why Subway franchises are in the news today? Anybody hear that? See, I pay attention to this stuff all the time. Subway is in the news because a random sample in Canada. What's that?
It's our favorite place. But
It's got to be across the world, but it is a random sample of Food Safety Health Commission, whatever it is there. It's equivalent to our USDA. A random sample of their chicken breast sandwich found that 50% of all the chicken breasts in their sandwich shops were made from soy. Oh no, not 50%. 50% of each patty was soy and 50% was chicken. So you're not even getting the real thing when you go there. So that was in the news today. So you may, when you go turn your radio on to hear the news, you'll hear that and go, oh, that's what he was talking about. So, of course, Subway's in denial, but they're lying. And so that's for meat. So canned meats, just don't make them. They're convenient and they're good for when you're in a pinch, but don't make them a big staple of your diet because they contain a lot of other stuff. They could contain soybean oil, which we don't like, but that's in the fats module. Vegetables. Now, in terms of vegetables, fresh and frozen are at the top of the list, and then canned vegetables are just like canned meat. Convenient, but they're not as good as fresh or frozen. No limit to how much you should eat, but eat some every day. No limit to the amount, but the minimums. It's either 3 or 4 cups per day. Fruits, only fruits allowed are anything that have the word berry in their name. Strawberry, raspberry, blueberry, blackberry. And berries, and you're limited to a quarter cup per day. And if you want to know why, when you get into the website under the additional resources, there's a kind of a, I don't know, you call it a book chapter or just a long article that we have on our website on nutrition. And if you want to concentrate or focus on the part that talks about carbohydrates and digestible carbohydrates. So if anything that's a berry, raspberry, blueberry, whatever, blackberry, the amount of digestible carbohydrate that is in berries is essentially 0. There's a little bit, but not very much. Whereas the amount of digestible carbohydrate in a banana is on the high end of the scale. So if you're a diabetic, you probably know that a banana will skyrocket your blood sugar If you're, and then that varies maybe a little bit, but not to the same extent. Same things with starches, but for now you are only allowed like a half-pound potato per day, and you can cook that any way you want for now. You want to stick it in the microwave, you want to turn it into French fries, you want to bake it, you want to boil it, however you want to do that. You can. That's what you're limited to now. You don't even have to do that. If you want that and need that, and you're diabetic, make sure that you stay at the 145 or 150 blood sugar number 2 hours after your meal.
So 1/4 of a potato?
No, half-pound potato per day. Most of the potatoes in the loose potato section of the grocery store, most of those are about a pound. So, and once you figure out and look quickly, just take 2 or 3 and weigh them on the little scale they have there. Once you get a good idea of which about a pound, then you can just cut it in half when you get home. You don't have to find half-pound potatoes. That's almost all of them are around 1 pound. Just get those and then cut them in half and cook them up, or just cook it up and then cut it in half, whatever. But it's not required, but we're putting it in there as optional. And if you want to eat it and you're diabetic, make sure that you follow those blood sugar guidelines. So what are some of the things you may experience? Well, you're going to lose a lot of water, like I mentioned earlier. And what this may lead to is headaches, dehydration type headaches. So drink a lot of water to replenish it. If you have high blood pressure, your blood pressure will likely lower from this water loss. I don't know if you can remember or if you even know, but if you have high blood pressure and you're on medication for it, the first medication your doctor tried was probably a diuretic to get rid of a lot of the fluid in your body. And so this diet does the same thing as the prescription medication does. So it may do it a little bit more depending on if you're still on a diuretic or if it's still part of your medication or not. You may, because of this headache, the only thing that will help this headache is Tylenol or anything with acetaminophen. So you can get the generic acetaminophen at the grocery store if you get these headaches. There's no way that I know of predicting whether or not you would get them. And if you get them, there's no way of me knowing how to tell you how long they would last. So we have people that don't get them, we have people that get them, and we have people that get them and they're gone in a day or two, and we have people that struggle with them for 5 or 6 days. So I don't really know what to tell you other than if you get them, the only thing you can do is take Tylenol. And this will be the only time I would tell you to take Tylenol for anything. Now, the last 2 things I want to talk about are exercise and sleep. I don't really have anything in terms of recommendations on what kind or how much or how frequent or any kind of thing in terms of exercise for you to do. And we won't have anything for you to do on exercise until we get to the exercise module. We have to get through all the food stuff first. So with that being said, if you're walking or you want to start a walking program, feel free to do that. If you're jogging, I wouldn't do that. I would stop doing that. I would do something else if you wanted to do some activity. But if you wanted to start a walking program or you wanted to go to the YMCA and do the high intensity aerobics or something like that, or yoga or something, feel free to do that. But if you're jogging, don't do that. And outside of that, if you don't want to start anything, you're welcome to do that too. Now, in terms of sleep, there's some guidelines. We have a specific module on sleep where we talk about a bunch of different things. But in the module guide on the website, there's 3 or 4 different things listed there in bullets for you to do to sleep better. In terms of, I think they're like, turn the temperature down in the room where you sleep at night. Stop, limit your exposure to bright lights later in the evening. Things like that. Those are listed in the handout there on the module guide. And whenever you get started, those are the things you have to do. So I think if you go to the website also on the additional resource, it's a lot. We covered a lot of stuff today. And there's a lot of other stuff on the website, especially in the additional resources, the making your, creating your meal plans, going to the grocery store, and all that stuff is there as well. So there's a bunch of stuff there for you to access and use. So I want to go back to when I first started and say that it's really important for you to have a plan when you get started, because it's going to be helpful for you. Because the worst thing that can happen, in addition to all this environmental pressure, the worst thing that can happen to you is to finish your day at work and wonder what you're going to have for dinner tonight. Because we do that every day, all the time. And with all this environmental pressure, the drive-through or the delivery method is really easy. It's an easy fallback position. But when you've got these issues going against you metabolically, and you've got this environment pushing you to keep it there, it's really hard. So you're going to have to buckle down. You're going to have to go through these plans and really get serious about it, because otherwise nothing's going to change. I mean, this could be the best diet program in the world. It could be the easiest thing in the world, but it's so hard to make changes because our environment makes it difficult that it's really a struggle. But this makes it easier. The other thing that will make it easier is when you sit down and decide. So if you have another thing that will make it easy is if you have a spouse at home, get him or her involved doing it as well, or be sneaky about it. I have 2 daughters in high school, and everywhere they go, parents, not anymore because they're high school, but when they were younger, how do you get your kids to eat vegetables? Well, you just don't talk about eating vegetables. You just put it on the plate, and they start doing what their parents do. So maybe you can, if your husband is, or if your spouse is resistant to change, maybe you can just be sneaky about it. This is what's for dinner.
Potato on the side.
If you want it. If you want something else, cook it yourself. And, that'll probably last for 2 or 3 days. If even that long. So do you guys have any questions? I know we covered a lot, right? You got to let it all soak in. Go back to the slides are on the website. There's a video. There's 2 different videos of this, I think. The videos are split up into the presentation and the guide. And then the audio, the recording of today will be up there pretty soon, next couple days. So there's all, and in the additional resources section, there's a bunch of other stuff there for you. It's kind of a balancing act, right? Because, if you're going to buy a new dress and you go to the store and there's 1,000 dresses, how do you decide? But if there's only 2, well, you just say yes or no to one of them, right? Same thing with this. There's just so much. I mean, I have to make a decision at some point with how much information do we give you, because then it could be you're overwhelmed and don't know where to go or how to get started, or it's too much.
The hardest thing is, to me, is like coffee in the morning. And I always put a little sweetener, a little cream in it. And
Yeah.
You're saying none of that.
Cream's fine. Cream's fine because it's 100% fat. As long as it's not flavored, plain.
I was gonna say,
Yeah, plain creamer. And you have to. It seems like the grocery stores will, or maybe it's the dairy manufacturers, but it's the same. If they put it in a creamer bottle, they, jack up the price by 40%. It's plain cream, or you could just go get the heavy whipping cream and put a tablespoon of that in your coffee. It's the same thing. A little trick today.
Save some money.
That's right. And time. If you guys have any more questions? Excellent. Well, thanks for being here. We'll see you guys in 2 weeks. And that support at hpiacademy.net is the email address. If you have questions, send them to there. We'll help you out. We'll see you in 2 weeks from today.
So I need to go check my emails.
Okay.
Can you say about miracles for us?
Yes, I can. What's this? Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Something's happening to my computer here real quick. Lost my mouse. Okay, here we go. All right.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Thanks.
Oh, this is your pen?
Yes.
I won't be here in 2 weeks, I'm gonna be on vacation.
Okay.
You can just look at the module for it and I'll.
Yes. Did you leave me your stuff here?
I'm sorry.
Did you bring? Is your name and email address on
Yeah,
here?
and they sent me a lot, I think they set me up an account already.
Who are you?
Okay, email.
Okay.
I think I got already something already, so they sent me an email saying they confirmed.
Thank you.
Bye, ladies.
So what I'll do is I'll just have them check to make sure they're all
Okay.
signed
Okay.
up.
And I'm going to, I call it a fat farm. And my mom has some heart issues, and my dad took her to this place in California last year, and it was all about eating right and all this stuff. And she did really good. She came back